Hello my friends, and welcome to the second part of the Everyday Tea Knit Along. Last time we cast on stitches, made the edging, and then we worked in the round making perfectly jogless stripes until we finished the body part of the tee. Now it's time to shape the sleeves and finish the back of the t-shirt. We'll use slim I-cord and a bit of ribbing to make sure the edges of the fabric that will eventually become the edges of the sleeves stay flat and look nice. Now that the body of the tee is as long as it should be, we are ready to shape the sleeves. The shaping happens in a very simple way. We're going to make steep increases at the sides of the tee. So it's going to be right here and over here. We know where one side is. It's where the marker is. It's where the beginning of the round is, right? But we are not sure where the other side is exactly. So it is somewhere over here. And that's the whole idea behind the preparation round. We're going to find that other side. We're going to knit half of the stitches and place the marker to know where exactly we should make the other set of increases. So let's make that round. Knit as many stitches as the pattern tells for the size you're making in step 2.1 of the pattern. For me, it's going to be 64 stitches, and that's going to be half of the stitches that you have on the needle. So simply knit them stitch by stitch. 63 and 64. So I've knit half of the stitches. And now I'm ready to place a marker. This step is very important. This row is round is very important because now we basically set up the groups of stitches that would make the back and the front of the tee. So it is very important to know exactly that you knit half of the stitches. So if you are not sure, or if you're just cautious, take a moment and count the stitches again before you place a marker, okay, to make sure that you are in the middle of all the stitches, that this is one half of the stitches and this is the other half of the stitches. So now place a marker and then continue knitting stitches to the end of the round. And this is the end of the preparation round. So what happened in this round? Not much really. We worked for one round, so the work became slightly bit bigger, so we've got it a bit longer. But the most important thing is this marker. Now we know exactly where the other side of the work is, the other side of the tee is, and we are ready to make increases. And we'll make increases in an increasing round. Here's how it works. Knit one stitch and then knit one stitch front and back. What does it mean? It means that we're going to make two stitches out of this little fella. Here's how we do it. Insert the tip of the right needle from left to right as if we are knitting this stitch the usual way. So wrap the tip of the needle with the yarn, pull it through, but don't let this stitch off the left needle yet. Instead, we're going to insert the tip of the right needle again into the same stitch, but this time we go from right to left, like this. And we pick the back loop of the stitch and again knit through that stitch. Now we can let it go because we have two stitches already on the needle. That's exactly what we were looking for, right? We increased one stitch right here. Now we knit to two stitches before marker, and that means the next marker that we have in the work, and that would be this marker, the new one. So we knit and knit and knit and knit until we get to two stitches before this marker. Okay, I'm almost here. I have three stitches before the marker, so I knit one stitch and I am where I want to be. I want to be at a spot where I have two stitches before the marker. And now we're going to make another increase, basically the same way. We knit one stitch front and back, increasing stitches right here. So I knit one stitch, but don't let it off the needle. Then I insert the tip of the right needle again into the same stitch, but through the back loop, and knit it again. So we made another increase, and now we knit a stitch and slip the marker from the left needle to the right needle. And then we work exactly in the same fashion to increase stitches in this half of the stitches. So we're gonna knit one stitch, then knit front and back, and then we'll knit and knit and knit stitch by stitch until we get to 2 stitches before marker, and the next marker in the work would be the one that marks the beginning of the round. And one more stitch, and here I am. Here's my marker, and I have 2 stitches before marker. Even though they are split between needles and it looks a bit awkward, still this is the spot where I start increasing when I increase another stitch. And I do it the same way. So I knit one stitch through the front loop and then through the back loop. And then I rearrange the needles. If you are making a bigger size and you are working on one circular needle, you won't have to do that. But for smaller sizes and the setup that has 2 circular needles involved, then we have to rearrange the needles, and then I'm gonna knit that last stitch of the round and slip the marker. And that would be my first increasing round. Now we're gonna work the same increasing round in every round for a number of times. And the number of times depends on the size you're making. For me, it's going to be 6 times, but it could be up to 9 times depending on the size. And we are increasing stitches in every round, so we're going to make steep increases. And because we add 4 stitches in every round, the number of stitches on your needles will change. By the time you're done, you should have the number of stitches that is mentioned in step 2.2 of the pattern. But until then, we repeat the increasing round. Knit one stitch, knit front and back, then work to the 2 stitches before marker, and then make another increase and knit one stitch, slip the marker, and so on, until you have the number of stitches that you need, that the pattern tells you to have. And when you have that number of stitches, that means you completed a number of increasing rounds that you were supposed to complete. Okay, here's what happened. Actually, 2 things happened. First of all, I came to one of the markers. That's my end of the round, but it would be the same thing if I came to this marker. So as long as you are at the side of the work and you notice that you don't have much yarn left, it's time to attach a new ball of yarn. For me, the decision is easy because obviously there is not much yarn at all. But if you have a long tail and you're just not sure whether it will be enough to get to the next marker, then here's a simple rule of thumb. If you have, if that tail is at least 4 times as long as the length of the fabric to the next marker, then you are good to go. You will have enough to get to that marker. But if your tail is shorter than that, then it's better to join a new ball of yarn because we don't want any knots or joins or anything right in the middle of the T or at the very back of the T, depending on the side you are in. So how do we join the new ball of yarn? It's very simple. I'm gonna get a tail from the second ball and simply tie it with a basic, very basic square knot, just like this. And make sure that knot is as close to the stitch as possible, because we don't want it in between stitches or on the stitch. We want it at the bottom of the stitch. So I tie this knot, and I will probably trim this tail because it's too long and it will get in the way. Okay, so that was one thing, and that's taken care of. The other thing that I noticed, because I was increasing stitches, now I have enough stitches to work on one circular needle. And that's great news, because working on one circular needle is way more comfortable than working with 2 circular needles. So I will put the other needle aside for now. We'll need it pretty soon, but for now I can finish the increasing rounds on one circular needle. And here's my last increase. front and back, then I knit the last stitch of the round and slip the marker from the left needle to the right needle. So this is the last increasing round for me. How do I know that? The easiest way is to count the, well, of course you can keep track like using a row counter or something, but if you haven't used a row counter, then count the bars, because every increase that we made created a bar over here on each side of the marker. And when you count those bars, you should have the number of bars that is the same as the number of the increasing rounds that you should make. Another way to know that you are at the right spot is to count the stitches. Actually, it is a very good practice to count the stitches every now and then, especially when the pattern mentions the stitch count. That means that at some point the number of stitches was changing, and it is very good to count the stitches to know that you are doing right, that you have the number of stitches that you should have. So basically now we shape the sleeves, and like I said, you can see those lines of increases, and if you fold the work a bit, you will see that now we have this shaping that actually is a sleeve. So they're not really big sleeves, but still they require some shaping, and we did it, and we did a good job at that. In a moment, I'll tell you how to make the sleeves longer, but before we get there, I want to show you one more thing. Basically, we are ready to start making the back and the front of the top separately. So we're going to work on half of the stitches. That's going to be our back, and then the other half would be our front. But if we start doing that right now, then we would stretch the work over here. Where we divide the stitches, right? And then we would have those loops, and they won't look nice. Not that somebody would be inspecting your work, of course, but still, if we can make it better, then it's a good idea to do so. And to keep those holes away, to prevent them from appearing, we would cross the two stitches. We would cross these stitches over here, those that are at each side of the stitch mark, and we would do the same over there. So how do we do that? And that would be our last round, because from after that round we're going to work back and forth, making the back and the front of the top separately. But the last round is work to one stitch before marker. So we would start crossing at this point. So work every stitch, so knit basically every stitch to one stitch before marker. Okay, just a couple more stitches, and see, we are not making increases, no more increases here, right? We just knit all stitches. Okay, I have one stitch before the marker, and that's where I stop. So we will cross, like I said, the stitches that are at each side of the marker. But first we need to remove the marker, because we can't cross stitches, right? The marker is in the way. So what do? We slip one stitch from the left needle to the right needle, and we do it purlwise. So we insert the tip of the right needle from right to left, like this. We don't want to twist the stitch, we just want to relocate it. Now we remove the marker temporarily. I put it aside, but not far away, because we'll bring it back shortly, and slip the next stitch to the right needle. So these are the two stitches that we want to cross. Now insert the tip of the left needle into the first slipped stitch. That's going to be the second stitch from the tip of the right needle, and then pass it over the other stitch, but don't drop any of these stitches. We are simply crossing them. See, they both stay on the needles. That's very important. We don't want to drop them. And now we can place the marker on the left needle and slip this stitch from the right needle to the left needle. Why we do that? We want to knit it, and that's what we're gonna do right now, because both these stitches were not knitted yet. So we knit the stitch, and then we slip the marker. And then we repeat the same thing. We work to one stitch before the next marker, which would be this little guy, and then we cross the stitches again. Okay, I'm at the next spot where I plan to cross the stitches. See, I have one stitch before marker, and I'm gonna cross these two little fellas. And we do it the same way. First, I slip the stitch, remove the marker, then slip the next stitch, insert the tip of the left needle into the first slip stitch, pass it over the other stitch. Don't drop them. Again, it's very important. We don't want to drop them. Then place the mark on the left needle and slip the other cross stitch to the left needle. Then we knit that cross stitch and slip the marker from the left needle to the right needle. So that's it. Now we are not working in the round anymore. We finished shaping the sleeves. It's pretty nice. Like I said, if you look this way, then you will definitely clearly see the shaping. And now we are ready to work back and forth, finishing the top part of the back and the front separately. At this point, I want to tell you how to add the number of stitches, how to make the sleeves longer. Because to make the sleeves longer, because I want to show you how the tee is looking so far. So this is, oops, and my marker ran away from me. This is how it looks. So this is the body of the tee, and this is the sleeve, right? And it looks the same on the other side as well. But what we're gonna do now, if we want to make the sleeves longer, so if you want them to be like about this long, right? Then we need to add more stitches, and we need to do it right now before we start working on the back. So before we move on to the actually working on the back, we need to add the stitches. We won't do it right now because it's not in the pattern, but I've been getting that question quite often. So I decided to add this information so you understand what you're doing and how to make the sleeves longer. So how many stitches do you want to add depends on how long you want the sleeve to be. The pattern, the gauge stated in the pattern tells that every 21 stitch will give you 10 centimeters 4 inches, but it's not exactly true in this case, because as you start wearing the tee like this, for example, right, then the stitches will stretch. So in reality, every 21 stitches will give you more than 10 centimeters 4 inches. So I don't know how much more because I haven't tested it. Like I said, it's not in the pattern, but I would say it would give you at least 12 centimeters or maybe even 14, depending on how long the sleeve is and how much it stretches when you wear it. But approximately just decide how long you want the sleeve to be if you want to make it longer. Then just add as many stitches as you feel that would be the right number of stitches to add. And it is very important, if you do add stitches, make a note about the number of stitches that you added, the number of those extra stitches, because we will need that number. I will mention it later on. Again, it's all optional. You don't have to do it. The pattern doesn't explain you how to do it. But like I said, is because you were asking, I want to explain how to add those extra stitches. So if you do decide to make the sleeves longer, make a note about the number of stitches. Just write them in big letters, because then you would know, you would need that number a few more times, and I'm gonna mention it as we go. But I'm not gonna add the stitches now. I'm gonna just follow the pattern. As to the way how you can add them, any way will do. Either it is knit on, cast on, or at the beginning of the row, or backwards loop, cast on, whatever way you find easy and workable and doable, then just go with that way. But we will move on to following the pattern. And the pattern tells us to work this setup row. So if you are adding stitches to the length of the sleeve, then in the setup row, at the beginning of setup row, you would cast on a certain number of stitches depending on the length that you want to add. I won't do that, like I said. So I would just work on the setup row as it is. And if you do cast on more stitches, then after you cast on, you will follow the same instructions that are given in the setup row. So this casting on would be between kind of between the shaping and the setup row 1. So the setup row 1, knit 1 stitch, then slip 1 stitch with the yarn at the back of the work, then purl 1 stitch, knit 1 and purl 1. So why do we do that patterning here? Because we want the edges of the sleeve, because these would be the sleeves, basically the opening of the sleeve, right? And we want the edges to be nice looking. We don't want them to curl in or out or any other way. We don't want them to be flimsy. So we're going to use these 2 stitches to make a sophisticated edging so that it stays flat and does not curl. And then we add a bit of ribbing, 3 stitches of ribbing, just to keep it nice looking and to kind of echo the ribbing that we have over here, so the whole design looks consistent. Okay, now that we made that edging on this side of the work, we're gonna work to 5 stitches before the marker. So we're gonna work until we get to a spot that is 5 stitches before this marker. So simply knit all stitches one by one until you get to that spot, 5 stitches before the next marker. Okay, let's see how many stitches I have. So here's the marker and I have 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so 3 more stitches to knit and before I can do the edging. So 5 stitches before marker, that's it. And now we do basically the same type of edging. We would purl 1 stitch, then knit 1 stitch, then purl 1 stitch again, that's our ribbing, and then we work 2 edge stitches, 2 selvages. So we slip 1 stitch with the yarn at the back of the work, and then we knit 1 stitch. And we remove the marker. We won't need it anymore for now. We will need it again, but later in the project. And turn the work. So we are not working in the round anymore. We turn the work and we work the setup row 2. Again, if you added the stitches over here to make your sleeves longer, then you should do the same thing to add the same number of stitches. That's why it was important to make a note. The same number of stitches over here at the beginning of the setup row 2. And then whether you add stitches or not, here's how we work the setup row 2. We slip 1 stitch with the yarn at the front of the work, and we slip it purlwise. We insert the tip of the right needle from right to left like this, and the yarn is at the front of the work, see? So we slip 1 stitch and then we purl 1 stitch. And then we work in the ribbing pattern. We knit 1, purl 1, and knit 1. And then we purl all stitches until we get to 5 stitches before the next marker, until we get to that edging basically that we made, that we set up in setup row 1. Okay, let's see how many stitches I have before the marker. 2, 4, 6. Okay, 1 more stitch. Actually, because we already set up the edging in the previous row, you will see that the knit stitch is kind of visible here among the purl stitches over here. So that would be the sign that it's time to stop and make the edging. So we knit 1 stitch, purl 1 stitch, knit and purl, and then slip 1 stitch with the yarn in front of the work like this. And then we remove the other marker. So this marker goes away to wait until it's needed again. And we move on working on the same group of stitches. That would be the stitches of the back, the same group of stitches that we worked in the previous 2 rows, the setup rows. And the other stitches will be just sitting on the needle. We would just leave them here. So how do we do that? We could either transfer these stitches right now to the other circular needle that I have right here, or we could simply start working the next row with the other circular needle, and then this circular needle that we currently have in the work, it will hold the other group of stitches after we are done with the first round, with the first row. So that's an easier option as opposed to transferring stitch by stitch from one needle to the other. But if you prefer transferring stitches, then of course you can do that, no harm in that whatsoever. So the next two rows would be basically the same rows as we've just worked with the setup rows, but without the removing the marker part, because we don't have any markers in the work right now. So the right side row, that would happen every time we work, we are looking at the right side. We would knit one stitch, then slip one stitch with the yarn at the back of the work, and then work 3 stitches in ribbing: purl, knit, and purl. And then knit all stitches until you get to the last 5 stitches of the row, to the last 5 stitches of this group of stitches. That would be somewhere over here, yeah, right here. So when we get to the last 5 stitches of this group, then we would stop and we would do the other edging. And now, because this edging already is 2 rows high, we can clearly see it. So you can't miss it basically, because you see there's definitely a purl here. And even without counting the stitches, like 5 last stitches, you will understand that it's time to stop and make the edging. So I purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and then I slip 1 with the yarn at the back of the work and knit the last stitch. And now, because I used 2 needles in this row, then I keep all stitches of the other group on the other needle, so it's going to be just hanging there, and I will continue working back and forth using 1 needle. So we keep all stitches on 1 needle and we use the other needle as our working needle. I often also get question about the magic loop technique, and you ask whether we can work this top using just 1 long circular needle and magic loop technique. You can, up to a certain point. You can, of course, make the body of the top. Of course, you can shape the sleeves using the magic loop. And you can even transfer the stitches to, let's say, scrap yarn or something to keep them just hanging there until you work on the stitches of the back. But we will still need these stitches when we finish the back and the front, and they are both ready. When we get to the point when we have to make the shoulder seams, we would still need all stitches sitting on a needle. And it is very convenient to have stitches on 2 circular needles, as opposed to manipulating the needle, slipping the stitches here and there from the scrap yarn to the scrap yarn and so on. So it is very convenient to have the stitches to have each group of stitches on a separate needle. That's why I recommend to use 2 circular needles in this project. So I'm gonna turn the work, and we move on to the wrong side row, which of course happens when we are looking at the wrong side of the work. It's pretty obvious, but I thought I would mention that just in case. So I take the other tip of the same circular needle, and the other circular needle is just hanging there, keeping the stitches of the front safe until we finish the back and get to those stitches of the front. So meanwhile, wrong side row would be slip 1 stitch with the yarn at the front of the work, like this, then purl 1 stitch, knit 1 stitch, purl, and knit. And then we purl every stitch until we get to the other edging. That would be 5 stitches, last 5 stitches of this row, of this group of stitches. Okay, is it time to stop? no, not yet, one more stitch. So I purl this stitch, and right now you don't even have to count stitches, because what I was looking actually for this column of knit stitches on the canvas of purl stitches. And now that I came to that knit stitch, I don't want to break the pattern, so I'm gonna knit this stitch, then purl the next stitch, knit, and then we purl one stitch and slip the last stitch with the yarn in front of the work. And that was the wrong side row. So now we simply repeat those right side row, wrong side row, right side row, wrong side row, until we complete a certain number of rows. And the number of rows, of course, depends on the size that you are making. How do you count the rows? Well, row counter, of course, is one of the options, but you can also count the rows. You can also count the purls on the knit side of the work, or you can count the knits on the purl side of the work. The number of rows should be from the underarm. So this column of purls over here will tell us exactly how many rows we worked from the underarm, because we started working in this edging pattern right after we split stitches into two groups and we started working on the back. And when you have that number of rows, make sure you finish with the wrong side row. And the edging of the last row of the back for me, for the size I'm making, purl one stitch and slip one with yarn at the front of the work. So that's it. These are my all of my rows, the 28 rows that I was supposed to make from the underarm to knit the back of the tee. And once again, if you're not sure how many rows you knit, first of all, remember to finish with the wrong side row. So when you turn your work, the working yarn is at the right side of the work as you see it, with the right side facing to you. And then you can count either the bumps over here in the purl, this little column of purls that we have at the edging, or you can count the column of knits that we have right here on the wrong side of the work. So when you complete the number of rows that you are supposed to make, then we need to measure the work. It is very important, because this is the full length of the tee, as it will be, because the back doesn't have any shaping. As you see, it's just plain knitting, and then we're gonna leave it like that. We'll do shaping later when we shape the neckline for the front, but for now, no shaping at all. But we do need to make sure that the length is as big as it's supposed to be. So take a measuring tape, and then this time we are measuring the work from the cast on edge, not from the underarm, not from the spot where we split the stitches into groups, but from the cast on edge. So measure the work. Again, I line 0 with the cast on edge, and then I see how many centimeters I have. I have 33.5, which is pretty good, because I was supposed to have 33, so I'm okay here. Remember not to measure the needle. We measure the cast on edge to the point where the work sits underneath the needle. And now we finished the back. We know the measurement is right, and we simply cut the yarn, leaving a small tail. We don't need a long tail, because we're not gonna actually seam the work. We're gonna do the Russian grafting, which is fun, and it does not require any yarn. So I leave a small tail long enough to weave in later, and I simply leave these stitches on the needle. So now we have the back, the finished back on one needle, and we have those stitches, the other half of the stitches sitting on the other needle. And we'll work on these stitches when we make the front, but that would be in the next part of this knit along. And that was the second part of the Everyday Tee knit along. We did a great job shaping the sleeves and finishing the back of the tee. Next time we'll work on the front part of the t-shirt. We'll do a bit of mindless knitting, repeating the same right side and wrong side rows for a while, and then we'll shape the neckline without cutting the yarn and reattaching it again. The instructions are pretty straightforward. They're written out row for row in the pattern, so if you haven't got a copy of the pattern yet, you can download it at 10rosaday.com/everyday-t. Thank you for watching this video and have a wonderful week. I'll see you in the next tutorial.